Zach Zapata is Director of Assessments and Documentation for SAP NS2. Thanks for joining me today. A lot of discussion about continuous authorities to operate and the ATO community in general. What's your sense of what that transition, that evolution looks like for ATOs across government, Zach?
Yeah, absolutely. So rapid, secure deployment of solutions is always the goal, both for industry and for the government. So it really works on how we leverage continued growth with these programs. You see the FedRAMP 20X program that's being developed and how it can revolutionize how we are approaching security from an industry standpoint and how the government entities can start to leverage, use once, do once, use many. And that really allows for trust to begin to build, consistency and security control implementation to be built out. And it allows industry to really work with their government customers to work through this consistent SSP package, work with new and emerging technologies and how they implement those technologies with the expected goals of continuous security in their systems.
FedRAMP's been around for at least 15 years. And I remember when it first rolled out from GSA, that do once, use many times was the foundational principle of FedRAMP. Is it your sense that we're kind of coming back around to that idea in a really concrete way? A lot of folks have talked about it over the years, but it seems like that has become the North Star again. Is that a fair read on my part, do you think?
I absolutely think that's a fair read on your part. I think when it comes to how this program is being developed, you look at the KSIs that are being developed with the FedRAMP 20X program. It creates quantifiable, actionable actions that industry can really review, read, and implement, and the government can start to develop trust with how it is. Mm-hmm. They can start to automate those solutions, increase this pace at which they're authorizing their environments, authorizing the technologies being used, and how they're understanding it. You know, that's one of the things that industry and government relations struggle with, is how do we bridge the gap between those emerging technologies with those security frameworks? And working together, being partners in that effort, leveraging these new governance structures, leveraging these new methodologies, help share government understanding their customer responsibilities, understand how these technologies work, make them feel comfortable with migrating to cloud technologies.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned the continuous ATO process before we turn the cameras on. Is it your sense that there are potential unintended consequences that agencies need to make sure they're thinking about as they try to move in that direction?
I honestly think when it comes to understanding continuous ATO processes, it's knowing what your responsibilities are, feeling comfortable with what the technology is, reading the documentation and understanding the controls that your agency can inherit from a CSP and what they're responsible for implementing on their end. That is one of the biggest factors when it comes to making sure the secure implementation is there for your agency, you're using the technology as intended, and that partnership with industry really allows them to grow trust in the process.
What's the role or responsibility for an industry partner to work with an agency or work with the government as a whole to try to achieve that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to working with government or from an industry partner perspective, making sure your technology fits with the intent of the control. Sometimes control reads very black and white, and being able to explain the implementation of a control really allows for government to feel comfortable with the guidance and the conversation that is had around the implementation of a cloud product, especially when they're used to owning 100% of the controls, and understanding how that shift in inheritance, both from the CSP perspective to the government perspective, makes them feel more comfortable in their authorization process.
What's on the horizon for these agencies? What should they be thinking about that they might not have to deal with for 6 months, 12 months, a year, 2 years, whatever, but maybe should start to be on their radar screens as something that is over the horizon for them?
I think you have a lot of new governance programs that are working to be implemented. You see things like FedRAMP 20X growing. You see CMMC growing from a perspective of the DoD contractors. You're seeing new programs being created, leveraging for AI, and new guidance being drafted out. So understanding what those emerging technologies are, working with the policies being written with that, also supports the industry development of what those, of how they're implementing their security controls and how industry can meet the government needs for those technologies.
Zach, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.